Vembers greetings, I'm your host Dr. Wolfula with a quick review of the new Ghostbusters movie, Afterlife. But don't let the title fool you, there are barely any ghosts in this movie. I'm a fan of the Ghostbusters franchise myself. I love the original 2 movies, and I watched the 2 cartoon shows, but I'm not a hardcore obsessive like a lot of other fans of this franchise. Even I was paying attention to the latest attempt at a reboot of Ghostbusters though, a continuation of the original films directed by Ivan Reitman's son Jason, which is a bit of a nepotism thing, but I watched Up in the Air earlier this year. I thought it was good. So Jason Reitman is a capable filmmaker in his own right. Then the movie got delayed 4 times, and, you know, I kinda forgot about it after that. I didn't even remember this movie was coming out until a fan mentioned it the day before, so I bought tickets to the first screening in my area on a lark without intending to even review it. Ghostbusters Afterlife tells the story of a single mother and her 2 kids who try to make a new life at their inherited estate, a rundown farmhouse owned by the mother's recently deceased father, who seemingly abandoned his family to live out in the middle of nowhere near an old mining town.
You're saying he left us nothing?
Well, I wouldn't say nothing.
This deceased father is eventually revealed to be Egon Spengler, one of the original Ghostbusters, who was played by the late Harold Ramis, which was a good decision made for the movie as a hook. It connects this new film to the original while also memorializing Harold Ramis. His presence is felt throughout the movie, but it does get kinda sketchy with its tribute to Harold Ramis by the end though.
Do you experience feelings of dread in your basement or attic?
And Ghostbusters Afterlife is really bogged down by sentimentality. It sometimes ends up feeling like you're just watching some Gen Z kids wander through a faded roadside museum dedicated to 80s pop culture, with the adults desperately trying to explain to their phone-obsessed kids how important this all was decades ago.
Killer replica.
A replica of what?
A ghost trap?
The Spengler kids, Phoebe and Trevor, stumble upon Egon's old ghost-busting equipment, including the Ecto-1, as the ghosts Egon once fended off begin to re-emerge from their dormancy.
Egon came out here for a reason.
The siblings aren't alone as they revive the Ghostbusters. They receive a bit of guidance from Paul Rudd, the sexiest man alive. Oh boy, the things I would do to that man. Oh yeah. Anyway, Paul Rudd's role isn't really that substantial though. He relates a bit of exposition, and he sees some tiny Stay Puft Marshmallow Men fan service at a Walmart. It's honestly a waste.
Jamocha.
It feels like putting Paul Rudd in this movie is a tease of what this film should have been, an ensemble of adult comedic actors and actresses of today teaming up for a totally new Ghostbusters movie. Instead, the film focuses on kids, and it just feels like a parent trying to relate to his child by presenting Ghostbusters via Stranger Things, even casting a lead from Stranger Things. Give them a slice of the 80s the way it's been given to them already on that Netflix show. The movie takes place today, sure, but the setting is a small, isolated town with a 50s diner, and all the tech is exclusively stuff we saw from the 80s. It's like these modern characters go back in time. The setting of Somerville is also just not a captivating locale for a Ghostbusters movie in the same way New York was. It's just a bland and desolate backdrop trying to be different, but ultimately failing in being interesting.
What are you doing here in Somerville anyway?
Ghostbusters Afterlife doesn't give us new characters who could possibly ever match Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Harold Ramis ultimately, and the new characters barely sustain the film. Phoebe's a nerd who doesn't fit in, who isolates herself, and Travis is just horny, I guess. I think the only reason he tries to restore the Ecto-1 is in the hope that even having a rundown car with a ghost decal on it will still make him cool enough to get laid.
You went with the station wagon?
It's the only one that had an engine.
The other 2 members of the new Ghostbusters are Lucky, who is just there as the object of Travis's affections, and I'm not kidding, the other main character is a kid whose only given name is Podcast, because he has a podcast. That's like how the Burger King Kids Club would name its characters, dear God!
Yes!
And Podcast has a lot of screen time. He's just a comedy relief sidekick, but I ended up knowing more about Podcast than I did about any of the other main characters. All I know about Lucky is that her dad is the sheriff, played by that guy who vaguely resembles Dave Chappelle, and that Travis wants to bang her. I don't know anything else about Lucky or her personality. Is Lucky supposed to be lucky? I don't fucking know.
Your grandfather was a Ghostbuster.
This film doesn't really do a great job capturing the feel of Goonies or even Stranger Stranger Things though, because the kids in the movie don't feel like they really face any major challenges. There are no obstacles in their way, the kids can just effortlessly come and go as they please, entering a mountain's mines to check out weird shit carved in the cave's walls. No adults put in their path to make things difficult. The police barely stand in the way of the kids. There's no serious threat of consequences or adult intervention presented to the kids that gets in the way of their ghost busting beyond their gadgets being impounded briefly. It barely feels like the act of taking on the ghosts itself is a challenge. The world will apparently end, but it doesn't feel like the stakes are that high or that any of the characters could die. The kids are given everything handed to them on a silver platter. All of this pre-existing gear, they don't have to bring anything to the table themselves. It just feels like a safe adventure on rails.
Have you or any of your family ever seen a spook, specter, or ghost?
Ghostbusters Afterlife is also surprisingly somber and serious for a Ghostbusters movie. Sure, it has humor in it, but in the same way any modern blockbuster film has comedy relief peppered throughout.
Well, I'm also an escort. That came out wrong.
Yeah.
It's not heavy on comedy like the original film, where you'd have just spontaneous, improvised jokes by Bill Murray.
This man has no dick.
Any humor in this new film is telegraphed, and there are no laugh-out-loud jokes, just a few that provide a sensible chuckle.
Right, well, the only thing lurking inside here is my slowly dying soul.
Is that what that smell is?
There also just aren't many ghosts in this movie. You have Muncher, played by that piece of shit Josh Gad, who's basically just a blue slimer that munches things a bit more. You got a bunch of Stay Puft Marshmallow Men that essentially act as little minion substitutes that hopefully wake up little kids watching the movie with their cartoony antics that take place in a surprisingly pristine desert town Walmart. Totally not brand placement. Ads put in a Sony movie? Impossible! The Stay Puft Marshmallow Men don't do much. They're tacked on, and their presence doesn't make much sense. They're the only product in the Walmart that comes to life, but why? The reason why the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man becomes real in the original film is because Ray imagines him and Gozer takes on that form. In this movie, it's just pandering. Besides Muncher and the Marshmallow Men, that's it for the ghosts before the villain shows up and a surprise guest ghost at the end. There's like a brief scene of a ghost vortex scene, but all we get from that is a ghost skeleton that pops up in a coffee shop. The original film had a grand montage of vignettes showing ghosts popping up in the city, wreaking havoc. But this new film doesn't bother expending any creativity on the ghosts. Who cares about the ghosts in a Ghostbusters movie after all? I want to spend as much time possible with that little shit podcast.
Yes!
Ghostbusters Afterlife is less about the ghosts and more about the potential threat of ghosts re-emerging. It's revealed that the original Ghostbusters disbanded because they were too effective at their job. Eventually, there were no more hauntings left, and they went out of business, but it's absurd to think this group managed to wipe out all supernatural activity on the planet, but the kids had never heard of the Ghostbusters before or knew one of them was their grandpa.
We're closed.
You're probably wondering what the villain of Ghostbusters Afterlife is, though, and this is where I get into spoilers, so skip to this time code to hear my final verdict. The villain of Ghostbusters Afterlife is Gozer again, this time played by Olivia Wilde, and they do nothing new with Gozer. It's the same Keymaster Gatekeeper bullshit with Paul Rudd and the Spangler mom possessed.
I am the Keymaster.
I am the gatekeeper.
J.K. Simmons also has a brief cameo as the Gozer cult leader behind Gozer's second revival. The finale is the same old routine as the original film though, but less climactic, and it's held together by an appearance by the 3 surviving Ghostbusters helping to save the day: Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Ernie Hudson, which would be enough, but the living cast member cameos get overshadowed by a CGI ghost version of Harold Ramis pitching in, which is so bizarre. I can understand giving a brief appearance to a deep-faked Ramis, but the emotional payoff at the finale is entirely hinged on a silent computer-generated Harold Ramis instead of, you know, having the characters who knew Egon best give Spengler's family the closure they need. Instead, it just feels like the 3 living Ghostbusters are awkwardly standing around as this CGI version of their dead friend gets all the spotlight during their one scene together again. Why is a Ghostbusters movie so sentimental to begin with?
Hey, have you missed this?
Ghostbusters Afterlife is a serviceable sequel, but it misses the mark as a true Ghostbusters film. There are barely any ghosts, new or otherwise, the humor is light, and it retreads familiar ground with new characters who aren't very interesting. I give Ghostbusters Afterlife a muncher out of Slimer. A notice to Patreon supporters, I'm currently editing my new private Q&A. It'll be up soon. I'm also joined by my good friend Goulash. We're not friends. If you'd like to participate in future private Q&As and join in on my Thanksgiving weekend bonus movie night streams of the Thanksgiving films, support the channel on patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula today to access my bonus content. If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. I'd also like to thank these fine folks pledged my shout-out tier on Patreon for all their kind support. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without all their help. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.